As the fire blazed, something unimaginable happened. Though the flames licked at Abba's skin, they did not consume her. Instead, they swirled around her as if the gods themselves had wrapped her in their divine embrace. The villagers gasped in awe and terror. Then, without warning, the flames surged higher, spreading across the square and burning through the crowd with terrifying speed. But to their astonishment, the fire did not harm the innocent. It twisted and turned, as if it was searching for someone. And then came a scream. All eyes turned toward the source of the scream, and it was the Queen Mother. She stood frozen, her body engulfed in golden flames. The fire clung to her like a curse, burning her from within. "Help me! Save me!" she wailed, reaching out desperately. Her son, Prince Adu, tried his best to save his mother, but he was powerless. Efua, who had been standing nearby, turned and began to flee. She knew she had a part to play in the evil that unfolded and couldn't face the consequences. The Queen Mother crumpled to the ground, and within moments, she was gone, her form reduced to nothing but a pile of smoldering ashes. The truth had been revealed, and the gods had cast their judgment. Shame and guilt flooded the hearts of the villagers as realization dawned upon them. They had accused Abba, an innocent woman, when all along, their trusted Queen Mother had been the source of their suffering. Boadi, who had watched the horrifying scene unfold, rushed to Abba's side. She was still trembling, her tear-streaked face filled with disbelief. "The gods have protected you," he whispered. "You are not alone anymore." From that day onward, the village transformed completely. Abba and Boadi were married in a grand ceremony, and Abba became the revered queen of the village. The villagers, once fearful of her, now looked to her as their protector and guide. Years later, joy filled their household as Abba and Boadi welcomed twin children, a boy and a girl. The prince and princess were the pride of the village and were seen as a sign of the gods' blessings. But just as everyone let their guard down, tragedy struck again. On a morning like any other, a piercing scream shattered the palace's stillness. Abba bolted upright in bed, her heart pounding. The cry had come from the children's chambers. She and Boadi rushed to the children's room only to be greeted by a sight that stole the breath from their lungs. The prince and princess lay side by side, still as stone. Their tiny bodies showed no signs of struggle, no wounds, yet they were dead. Abba collapsed to the floor, screaming in agony. Boadi stood frozen, his breath shallow, unable to believe what he was seeing. Their beautiful children, their joy, their blessings, all gone. Just as they were drowning in sorrow, another messenger burst through the door. "My king," he cried, "the village. Something terrible has happened." Boadi's heart pounded in his chest. "What is it?" "People have died overnight," he replied, just like before. Boadi turned to Abba. "What is happening?" he whispered. Abba didn't know either. Something evil had returned, but with the Queen Mother already gone, they were completely baffled and didn't understand what was happening. The next day, the sun had barely risen when the villagers gathered outside the palace walls, demanding that Boadi and Abba take action. Boadi stood on the palace balcony, his face weary with grief. How could he protect them when he couldn't even save his own children? Inside the palace, Abba sat in silence, her spirit searching for answers from the gods. But when the vision came, it was more horrifying than she could have imagined. She ran to Boadi, her voice urgent. "We have to prepare," she said. "Something terrible is coming." Boadi turned to her, his eyes filled with confusion. "What did you see?" "The deaths. They are not like before," she whispered. "This is not the work of sorcery or black magic. This is Prince Adu's doing. He poisoned the villagers and our children." Boadi's eyes widened in shock. "Prince Adu, but he left the village after his mother's death." "He is the one," Abba shouted. "He is angry about his mother's disgraceful death and wants to take revenge. He has joined forces with a neighboring village, one twice our size. They plan to attack us to take the throne by force." "We will not just sit still," Boadi said firmly. "Prince Adu will never succeed." Boadi immediately began making preparations. He gathered his warriors, strengthening the defenses of the village. But Abba shook her head, knowing it was not enough. She approached Boadi with a solemn expression. "We can't win this fight with strength alone," she said. "Prince Adu's army is too powerful. The only way to defeat him is for me to break the rules." Boadi's face paled. "Abba, no. You can't use sorcery. It's too dangerous." Abba placed a hand on his cheek. "Trust me, Boadi. This is the only way to win against them." Reluctantly, Boadi agreed. Together, they prepared for the battle to come. The day of the attack came earlier than expected. The villagers trembled in fear as the enemy forces surrounded the palace. Prince Adu was at the front, his face twisted with a cruel smile. Beside him was Efua, Abba's sister. Prince Adu had promised to make her his queen if they succeeded, and she was too ambitious to decline. "Surrender now," Prince Adu shouted, his voice echoing across the battlefield. But Abba stepped forward, her blind eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Prince Adu laughed. "What can a blind witch do against an army?" he sneered. But his laughter died in his throat as Abba raised her hand. The enemy soldiers froze in place, their weapons falling from their hands. One by one, they collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Prince Adu's eyes widened in horror. "What have you done?" he screamed. "This is the power of the gods," Abba spoke out. "You had a chance at redemption, but since you chose to follow your mother's ways, prepare to join her wherever she is." Prince Adu's heart pounded in his chest. "This is impossible," he whispered, slowly stepping back. But then, he collapsed to the ground. Afua turned to run, but before she could take a step, she too crumbled to the ground. The battlefield was silent. Boadi rushed to Abba's side, his heart swelling with pride and relief. "You did it," he said. "You saved us." Days passed, and the village slowly returned to life. The villagers, once divided by fear and suspicion, came together to honor Abba and Boadi, their beloved king and queen who defied fate and won. They had lost so much, their children, their peace, and their joy, but they had also gained wisdom, unity, and a renewed strength to rebuild. And so, under the watchful eyes of the gods, the village of Asasi entered a new era, one of peace, prosperity, and hope.